Okay. You know how I said Roger van der Weyden is one of my favorite artists? This is one of my favorite artworks of all time, and it's by Roger van der Weyden. Let me introduce you to the portrait of a lady. Ah, this is her. Okay. Now, I don't know if you're disappointed by it or anything, but let me talk to you about this painting, and then I'll tell you why she's become one of my ultimate favorites. Okay? Okay. So what we have here is possibly a portrait of a young, newly married woman. It may have been part of a set or a pair. It was typical or traditional for a couple to have portraits of man and woman, and they would be in some kind of a jointed framework so that they would be displayed together. The position that she's in, with her hands crossed and she's looking down and to the side, this is very typical of this type of husband-wife portraiture. But we don't have the other side. And it's not going to be easy, if it still exists, it's not going to be easy to match up because we don't know exactly who she is. So we're going to look at this and we're going to try to find out not her name, but who she is. What has Roger van der Weyden captured in this portrait of a young woman? The image is of a very, very well-dressed young woman. And when I exaggerate the term or the word very, very, we need to take into account some fashion history, okay? So first of all, textiles were extremely expensive. And here she wears this extremely transparent veil over her head. You see this gorgeous, thin, transparent veil that's been pinned into an elaborate coiffure. Her hair has been braided into this like basket weave pattern, probably around some kind of an armature or structure to maintain that shape, and then woven with fabric, and then on top of this elaborate ribboned hair artwork, there's this extremely delicate veil pinned. So this is money, okay? It's money, it's status, and it's just in her hair so far. That's all we've looked at. Then we see a similar transparent veil on her collar, again, speaking to money. And then she has this tightly cinched black jacket, and it's being pulled tight around her waist by this red sash. And you can see the buckle of the sash has this gold buckle with this elaborate carving, or not carving, metal work. So is this an expensive belt? Yeah. And then she's got a few rings on her fingers. So we see a woman of high status, but not to the point where we can identify her, because other portraits like this of young women of high status would also feature some kind of wording or heralding, like some kind of a coat of arms. So you'd be like, oh, she's from the count of blah blah blah's family. Oh, she is this person's wife. There's nothing going on here like that. So that's why we have this hesitation. She's definitely of a higher status. But who? And why doesn't she have a herald? Okay. So her position. Her hands placed at her waist against this beautiful background. I could look at this kind of teal, turquoise, blue background all day long. It's very flat, this background. There's no landscape. There's no architecture. Instead, she's presented as if she's in front of a panel. This is typical of Northern European art, especially in portraiture. It's not unusual, it's the standard to have the figure modeled in chiaroscuro, highlights, midtones, and shadows, but against a flat, darker colored background. I don't even want to say darker colored because sometimes they're lighter colored, but just a flat background. So she's very Northern European in style. If we were to get into the logistics of her gown, of her veil, of her gown and stuff, she is totally of the Burgundian court, from the court of the Duke of Burgundy. So there's all these identifying factors, but we just cannot link her to anybody specific. Roger van der Weyden did produce a number of portraits of men and women at the Burgundian court because he was such a celebrated premier painter. The posture she's in with this downward gaze, she suggests a lady belonging to nobility. Additionally, her kind of aristocratic or nobleness is in this very subtle display of lavish luxury textiles and gold and gems that the Duke of Burgundy and his court were known for. Let's look at her in terms of composition. Oh, no, wait. One more thing. I can't believe I forgot to tell you this. So I said that she's like the height of Burgundian fashion. Now, if we were in class together, a few of you might have been like raising your hand, and I'd be like, yes, yeah, what's going on? And they're like, well, where are her eyebrows? What's going on with what's up with her forehead? Why she got like a 5 head? Okay, this, ladies in the room, this is what you would all want to do with your body to be at the heights of not only fashion, but beauty and elegance and grace. First, eyebrows were not in fashion, and so you would either pluck, shave, or bleach out your eyebrows. I know, it's the opposite of what we do today. We exaggerate our brows. Now, gone. Also, eyelashes. Eyelashes would be plucked out. I know, again, the opposite of what we do today, where we put all this like beautiful mascara and lash work on. Whew, I know. And then her forehead. Well, a high forehead and emphasized forehead was seen not only as graceful, but also a sign of intelligence and good breeding. And so to get this kind of hairline, you would pluck or shave your hairline back. Yeah, I know. It's extreme. It's extreme. The things we do for beauty, right? So this young woman here is displaying all of those elements of beauty during the Burgundian court. She's got that high forehead, the no eyebrows, no eyelashes look going on. Let's look at this in terms of composition, because Roger van der Weyden is a master of composition, and this is a really subtle masterpiece of composition. Here, I've drawn out some lines to help you see what I'm talking about. She's sitting at a slight angle. This posture, it twists her, it activates this space. A space that would seem fairly shallow with that flat background now has a pull of dimension because her shoulders are not perfectly flat with the plane of the painting. So put it at a slight angle, there's a little bit more movement here in this painting. Do you see what I mean by movement? She's activated the space. There's more wiggle room. If she was completely pressed up against that black blue background, we wouldn't get the same sense of depth. Okay, so he's given her a slight wiggle room. What this does is it visually activates the space. It energizes the figure. And then he doesn't keep our eye stable with boring, flat lines or long, stable lines. Rather than seeing these verticals and horizontals, what we see are these gorgeous triangles of space. The veil, it comes down into these sharp points. Again, this would have been the proper placement of your veil, ladies. But those sharp triangular points are then pulled at this angle by the turn of her shoulders. And then it's echoed or balanced in the V diagonal of her bodice. So very subtly, he's given us this movement up and around with a slight wiggle room, agitating the space with her body, with her presence. It's really lovely. It's so subtle. Now let's look at this and try to understand a little bit more about her. What has Roger van der Weyden captured in this woman? We believe this to have been a specific woman. Again, as I said, it may have been a portrait of a husband and wife. We've lost the husband's portrait. So she would have been identifiable. The characteristics that strike me are the soft cheek, those big, luscious, pouty lips, those downcast, like gray-brown eyes, those honey brown eyes. What do you think is going on? Why has Roger van der Weyden captured her in such a light? Her downcast eyes was seen as something proper. It was improper for women of birth and grace to make eye contact with men who they were not related to or married to. And so when we see her downcast eyes, we can think of her as simply having good behavior, good breeding, and she's being respectful. Okay, sure. There is a sensual quality to her in those lips. There's this tactile kind of pout to them. They almost seem pursed. It makes me want to know, like, what did she sound like? Was she a talker, or did she not talk a lot? What would it look like to see her lips move? Let's look at her hands. Because in many portraits, artists will represent the sitter's personality through the face and the hands. And the hands telling a lot about, does the sitter do a lot of manual labor? Do they work with their hands? Are their hands soft, or are they rough and calloused? Do they have cuts or bruises? The markings of the hands can tell the life of the sitter. Do they have a firm grip? Are they soft and gentle and graceful? Here, when we look at the portrait of a lady, Roger van der Weyden has created these hands that I wish we were in class together, because, like, what do you see in those hands? When I ask this question in class, I ask, do they look restful, agitated, relaxed? How would you describe her placement? Because this is very deliberate, right? We know that the artist could have put the hands in any way, shape, or form. So what is he trying to capture here in these hands? When I ask this question to students, often students will say that they look relaxed, but those thumbs, they poke out. They're not laying flat. So there's still some activity. There's still some energy. Look at how these four fingers seem to kind of collapse in on each other, press in. She's squeezing her hand. What is that? Is there some kind of pressure here? Let's go with that idea of pressure, squeezing of the hands. And then it's right next to the belt, that's squeezing her waist really tight. Constriction, control. Now let me tell you one other element about the fashion we see here. A red belt was often given to women right before or at the beginning of their marriage. It was another kind of token for a woman of marrying age. So this young woman with a red belt and her downcast eyes and her firmly set lips and those tense fingers. Is this a reflection of her mental state, her concentration, and this control? Is this a portrait of a woman who has great control, or a woman who has been pressured and contained to fit this model of perfection and beauty and grace? I don't know. But that's why she haunts me, because there's something removed from her. And what I mean by that is she seems to remove herself from this scene, and yet these fingers are active. And think about fingers and hands. They move things, they change things, they manipulate things. Is she being manipulated, or is she a manipulator? I don't know. But that is why I am so attracted to this painting. There's so much, and it's so quiet. Now, I told you that we don't know exactly who she is, but she is housed at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. And I just want to share with you why she's one of my favorites, because of this encounter I had with her. So back in 2013, I had just finished my master's degree in art history, and I didn't really have an affinity for Roger van der Weyden or this painting, which I had seen before in textbooks. And then I'm wandering around the National Gallery, and I come into the Northern European Renaissance room, and she's there, and she's across the hall from me, or across the room. And I'm just stunned. She is gorgeous. The color, the light, that wiggle room I told you about, it's mind-blowing when you're standing in front of her. So I walk up to her and I'm like breaking out in a sweat, and I feel like I'm meeting a celebrity, and like she's a person, she's not just a painting. And I'm like looking at her, and I'm like about to cry. I take this selfie with her, and what you don't see is that like just out of frame is a guard from the museum, because I'm pretty sure she thought I was going to steal her. I was just like having a moment with this painting, and the guard was like, what is going on with her? So I encourage you to visit these artworks in person, and she stole my heart. I just love her. Now, recent scholarship has tried to identify her. One scholar, his name is Willem Stein, attempted to identify her as Marie de Waelen, who was the illegitimate daughter of the Duc de Berry, Philip the Good. But this is simply based on a slight resemblance to Philip and his features. But I mean, I mention it because if you do a search for her, you might see it pop up that she's the illegitimate daughter, but it's not a confirmed, and it has very loose kind of facts to attach to that. So instead, I just want you to enjoy how wonderful she is and appreciate the very subtle elements of composition that Roger van der Weyden has given us in this very intimate portrait.